In this video, we'll demonstrate how you can add an ink control to your form view and then edit the ink using the new Alpha Anywhere ink editor. So you can see that we have a simple list control on the left here with some static data that represents the data source for our form control, which is on the right hand side here. So if I click on any row in the list, the data is displayed in the form, and then if I click on any field in the form, then the editor to edit that value in the field is displayed. So first name, last name, city are all standard text fields, so the editor for those fields is a text box. But if I click on the ink notes field, this is where we want to capture ink. So instead of showing a text box as an editor, I show the standard Alpha Anywhere ink control here, and now I can start scribbling. Obviously I'm using my mouse here, but on a real mobile device I'd be using my finger. So there's my ink value, and now if I save this, it's going to get saved back to the form. So there's the ink value over there, and then if I hit save again, the ink is going to be saved to the record, to the data source, which in this case is the list. So let's go back now to, say, another row and start editing over here. So first I'll go and click over there to open up the editor, and now scroll down in the editor. So let's start out and type some stuff, and then what we're going to do is change our pen color to, say, red, and type some more stuff. And then in the top window you can see we have a navigator that allows us to position where on the page our ink is being drawn. So I'm going to just move that over there, and now I'm drawing ink in over there. And let's go here and change our pen again over there, and now do some undos. There's undos basically, and now do redos. You can see those are all coming back, and I can basically when I'm holding down the undo button, I can actually drag to the left and the right, and it goes up and down through the undo stack. So basically there we have it. Hit the save button, and now hit save again, and now we've basically got ink for row 1 and row 2 over there. We can go back now to the ink. Let's click on the ink there, and now you can see if we go to the eraser, we can start erasing from the ink, etc. So the ink control is a very rich control, and the data that it captures is actually just character data that can be stored in a back-end database. And what we've shown over here is how the ink can be displayed on the form, and then when you tap on the ink you open up the corresponding editor for the ink. So let's pause now, and then in the next video we'll go behind the scenes and show how this was all configured. So we're continuing now to discuss how the ink control is added to a form view and how the ink is edited in an ink editor. So what we have over here is a list control that's acting as the data source for our form, and in this list we have a field called ink notes that is displaying the actual ink. So if we go back to the designer right now and look first at the list which represents the data source for this form, we'll go over to our list properties here, and first let's go to static data. We can see that what we have in the static data is a field called ink notes, which currently doesn't have any values in it. So ink notes is just a character field, and if we go now to our fields list, we can see that ink notes appears over here. But notice that we've set actually the control type. We're going to go here and set the control type of this ink notes field to ink, to indicate that what's going to be displayed in this field is not just raw, not just a raw string of text, but that it should be interpreted as an ink value. And then of course you can see that we've put ink notes directly on the screen. So so that basically describes how we display ink in the list. But now let's go over to the form, and if we edit the form here, we can see that basically the fields on this form are first name, last name, city, state, picture, and then ink, but that the first name, city, last name, city, and state field are all using a control type of label, but the picture field uses a control type of image, and the ink field uses a control type of ink. So basically that was all that we needed to do in order to display ink in the form, and then we set some properties of the ink control over there. So next we need to basically specify that we want to use an ink editor for this particular field. So if we go, let's go back to the form itself, and let's go and add in a new editor. So right now this editor set has editor 1 and editor 2. So let's go here and go into defined control sections, and we see that in the list of predefined controls is an editor here called editor ink. So I'm going to go ahead there and insert that. So now we've inserted a new editor. So this is editor number 3 now. And if we look at this editor, we can see that unlike, say, editor 1, which used a standard input controller text box where the user typed in the new value, this editor number 3 uses an ink editor to allow the user to capture the value. So basically there's our ink editor defined over there. And then if we go to our form right now, we just go over to the form, go over to the Fields tab, go to the ink notes page here, and we're going to go here and say that when we tap on the ink notes in the form, we'd like to edit it, and now we'll use our new editor, which is editor number 3. So now we've gone ahead and specified which editor to use when the user taps on the ink notes field in the form itself. So let's go ahead now and test that out. So we go over to working preview now, tap on the row, tap on ink notes, go down to our editor, type in some ink, hit the save button again, and there's the ink that is now displayed in our list control over there. So if we go now behind the scenes and look at the code that got written for us automatically when we chose this ink editor from the predefined ink editor set over here, we can see that for the most part the code for the ink editor is very similar to the code for any of the other editors. The key difference is that if we look, for example, at the set value, it's identical to, say, the set value event handler for just a text box. It just simply does set value. So set the value in the ink editor to the current value of the ink. But if we go to the get value, there's a little difference over there, which we'll discuss in the next video. So we're continuing with discussion of how to add ink to a form view control, and we're discussing how the editor itself is constructed. So before we go and take a look at the get value for the ink editor, let's go back to just the regular plain old input control editor and look here at the get value. So this is the event that fires when the user hits the save button in the editor to save the edits back to the form. So you can see that what the code does here is it simply reads the value out of editor text box 1 using get value, and then it returns that value. So in the case of the ink control, the code is very similar, but with one little wrinkle. So the get value here first needs to take the ink control itself. So we get a pointer here to the ink control, and then we do a commit on that. So that basically causes the value that has been drawn into the ink control to get committed back to the ink, to the underlying ink editor, to this field here, and then we can use the standard get value method to read the ink, which is just a string of characters, out of the ink editor and then put it back into the form. So basically what we've shown over here is how ink is just like any other character field in the data source and in the form, and then how you can configure the form view to display whatever is in the ink control, and then when the user taps on the ink field in the form, how you have an editor that basically opens up where you can actually draw in the ink, and then just like any other field on a form, when you hit the save button, the edited value gets written back into the data source. So thank you very much for watching.